So I wanted to give you another couple of examples, this time taken from a data set that looked at participants' reading times. So we literally recorded eye movement behaviour while people were reading sentences on a computer monitor. Now, what we had were individual participants. We're using the old-fashioned term of subjects here. You don't typically hear very often anymore. Which item they were reading. So we coded the individual sentences that they were looking at. The participants were either in group 1 or group 2. And to give you a little bit of background, they were either Harry Potter fans or there were people who were not Harry Potter fans. And one of the things we were interested in is being a fan of Harry Potter going to influence how you actually read sentences or not. And we had a whole bunch of reasons for thinking this, and in particular we were looking at what happens if you present a Harry Potter word, so something like Quidditch, in a sentence that is about Harry Potter. So Harry was practicing for the upcoming Quidditch match versus Harry was practicing for the upcoming badminton match, which would be a real world word in a Harry Potter context, or Harry was preparing for the upcoming football match. Football is a higher frequency word than badminton, but we could still use it, in a Harry Potter context. We were also looking at non-Harry Potter words in non-Harry Potter contexts. The idea being is basically, how much of a benefit do Harry Potter fans get from their previous experience of the books and the films. Might seem like a very trivial thing to do, but it has got important consequences. So for instance, if you're trying to communicate psychology or medical terms to a non-psychology or a non-medical audience, what sort of context should you use? So should you use a psychological one or should you use a real world context? So the interplay between the word that you use and the context is what we were really interested in, and how this varies from group to group. So what I want to show you here is just a recap of how we work out descriptive statistics, and I also want to show you how we would get them for each group, in this case Harry Potter fans and Harry Potter non-fans. So we've got our data set here, and what we're interested here is critical reading time. So it's column G that we're really interested in. So we can go down all the way to the bottom of this data file, and as you can see it's got lots and lots of rows. So we're interested in the critical reading time. So what are we interested in? Well, we want to see the mean, we want to see the standard deviation. We're probably not bothered about mode for this, but we might want to see the median reading time, and this is going to be overall. So again, we're just labeling the data so that we can come back to it later and remember what it means. Random numbers on an Excel workbook are no use to anyone. So remember, the command when we want to work out a mean is equals average, and we open up the brackets. And because this is a really tall data file, we're not going to scroll back up. I'm going to highlight the first cell that I'm interested in, put in my colon, and this time it's all the way back to cell G2 that we're interested in, and we get our mean reading time. So that is the mean fixation duration, how long the eyes stood reasonably still for, in milliseconds. And we want to know the standard deviation of that mean. As a rule of thumb, if you ever work out a mean, you want to know its standard deviation. So equals STDEV, STDEV, open up the brackets, and again click on the first cell that you're interested in, and then adapt back to the final cell, the firstmost cell. So we get our mean and standard deviation. We can highlight those two cells, click and hold the left mouse button down, right click, format cells, and again number, 2 decimal places. There we go, APA style. Now the median, again we can take the median by using the command equals median, open brackets, and again first cell we were interested in, and all the way up to the top of that data file. And again that gives us our median. Now just to recap, equals average for mean, and in brackets is the range of cells you want to look at, equals stdev, and the range of cells you're interested in, and the median. Please note that Excel will automatically capitalise these for you. You don't need to do that when you're typing it in. We can draw a histogram of that data again. We highlight the cells that we're interested in, and it will take a while because it has to scroll up through a very long set of data. And you can see as we scroll past there's some missing values, but we're not going to worry about that at this point in time. What has happened there is it's likely that the participant has actually skipped over the particular critical word, because you don't actually look at every single word when you're reading a piece of text. Your eyes quite frequently skip over words. So we can go to our Insert tab. We can go to these little blue bars for our Insert Statistics chart, and we can insert a histogram of this data. And as you can see, lots and lots of bins here, drawing out a smooth kind of curve of the histogram. But if we wanted to, we could play around with those bins. I don't think we really particularly want to here. We'll just leave them as we are, but we'll maybe give it a title and say overall critical reading times. Now, we might be more interested actually in finding out how our two groups behave. So what we can do is we can highlight our data with our headers all the way down to the last meaningful observation. And we can move this data into a new worksheet, because we don't want to mess around too much with the master data set, because then if we run into a problem we kind of have to start from scratch, and that's not ideal. So we can right click and copy, open up a new worksheet using the little plus, and then I'm going to use Control V to paste that data. Now if I want to know the mean and standard deviations for groups 1 and 2, there's a couple of different ways I can do that. So the first thing we need to do is sort our data into groups 1 and 2. So we go into data, we go to sort. Our data does have headers, so we leave that turned on. So we want to sort by group. And we might want to sort by a couple of other things as well. So we can add a level. We maybe want to sort by participant, or as it's labelled in this case, subject. We might even want to add another level and sort by item. So here we're first of all going to get all the people in group 1 in order of subject and item, which is just a nice systematic way to organise our data. And what we'll be able to do is find the middle part, or find where the two groups differ. So I'm looking in column C, and I want to scroll down until I find group 2. It's probably going to be about halfway. There we go. So when the 1s change to the 2s. Now what I can do is I can click on the row that's got the first group 2 participant, and I can right click over here on that 1586 and insert a row. So literally splitting the file into groups. And I maybe want to insert a couple more rows. Let's maybe put in 4. So we've got a nice gap between our groups. So maybe I want to work out the mean and the standard deviation for group 1. So I can put in group 1, I can type in mean, and I can do equals average all the way up to the top. So that gives me my group 1 mean, and then I can do my standard deviation equals STDAV, open the brackets, highlight my first cell that I'm interested in all the way down to G2. So there we've got our mean and standard deviation for group 1. Now what I would do offline with a piece of paper or something is write down what the first cell is going to be here. It's cell reference. So that's G1590 is going to be the first one that I'm interested in. And that's going to be a little time saver. So when I scroll right down to the bottom now, down to the bottom of the group 2 participants, I'm interested in group 2 this time. I want to work out a mean, and I want to work out standard deviation. I'm still in column G. This time I want to do equals average, open those brackets, first cell that I'm interested in, and we can't go all the way back to G2 now because that's going to read in all the group 1 data. So that's why I wrote down on a piece of paper that I am interested all the way up to G1590. Close off our little brackets, and then we can just double check before we hit return. It'll take a wee while because it's a big data set, but I think it's important to be reassured. There we go. And then we can do equals standard deviation, first cell that we're interested in, colon, all the way back to G1590. And there we have it. So by organising the data, sorting the data and putting in some blank cells, we can work out our means for each group, because you might be interested in comparing those two means. You don't always have to put the blank lines in between. That's just one way of doing it. I'll show you the other way to do it. So let's go back to our first data set and we copy this across. I'll make a third worksheet. Let's just keep it nice and in order. And we'll paste that data in. Copied. Pasted. And we'll sort our data. Data, sort. It has headings. We want to sort by group, subject, participant, item. Now this time we're not going to actually put those blank rows in. All we're going to do is scroll down till we find that point where the groups separate, which is in the 1500s. So we keep scrolling down until we find, there we go. So here is where group 1 and group 2 diverge. So again, I'm going to write down on a piece of paper that group 1 ends at cell 1585. Group 2 starts at 1586. So I'm just scribbling that on a piece of paper just now. I can go then all the way down to the bottom and I can put in group 1, group 2, mean, and then equals. I know that the first cell that I was interested in, equals average, was G2. That was the first meaningful piece of data, not the header, and that went all the way to 1585. G1585. And it gives us our mean. Our group 2 equals average, and the last cell that I want is obviously the last cell in group 2, and I remember that that started at 1586. So again, you don't always have to put in those blank lines, you don't always have to segregate the data physically. By making a note of the cell references, you can actually do it a slightly different way. We can then work out I'll just copy group 1 and group 2. We want to know the standard deviations for these, and we can follow the same process. Equals stdev. We know that G2 was the first one we were interested in, all the way down to G1585, and that will give us our standard deviation for group 1, and then equals standard deviation stdev, and last piece of group 2 information all the way back up to G1586. And again, we have a different way to get to the same information. So the takeaway messages are: remember your equals average and cell references for means, equals stdev for your standard deviation calculations, and minimum equals min, cell references, maximum equals max, median nicely and conveniently equals median, and mode equals mode.